Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scout. Morning coffee or tea, something happening on the left-hand side there. But I am back in action after vacation, thanks to John and Gally holding up the fort, but always using the wrong intros, and it's just like rookie errors. But I'm back in action. It is Monday. Grumpy is here. He's grumpy because we're back from vacation to reality and work and all those kinds of things. A guy who never has to work because he has generational wealth, but looking really pale today is the Polish Prince. What's happening?
Back in action, man. It feel good to be back. Although I'm a bit behind, it sounds like, but I think we'll iron out those kinks as the summer goes on. Same thing with the club. You gotta fix little pieces here and there, and it looks like that's exactly what they're doing. So yeah, glad to be back. I'm here. I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, you are finally at the palace, but yeah, clearly, yeah, see, there's like, you would think a palace would have like really good Wi-Fi and stuff like that, but 10 seconds into the show, you are already frozen. So Alan is with us. Good morning. Good morning to everyone joining us right now. Give a hit that like button, thumbs up, and all that kind of stuff. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. There's a lot happening, a lot coming your way. We are working actually on the new channel as well, the Premier League channel, coming up with like new content. Actually, this week will be our first official shows coming up this week on that one. So we'll get the Prince back, hopefully, eventually. A lot to talk about. Obviously, there was the Florian Friday last Friday, kind of like missed out on the action on that one. A lot was happening throughout the week. I was able to kind of like follow it, but not like really like all over it like I normally am. And then obviously the Quansah deal, now the Guehi ordeal. Today could be your Milos Monday because we are I did see a photo. I think actually like it was shared afterwards in Discord as well, that he's on the plane headed for the medical. So if nothing goes bad there, that's all said and done. He'll be in action, and we have our new left back. I know there was a lot of talk about Robertson last week, so we'll try to talk about that. Hopefully, we can get the Prince back over here. Otherwise, we'll chat over here with you guys in terms of like Robertson, that deal with Atletico. There was a lot of that floating around last week. Obviously, the Quansah stuff started floating around, and it was instantly done. He said it that way. Now there's a lot of talk about Guehi. I do want to go into their stats and kind of compare it there and see what everybody thinks about that deal. Because I did notice Quansah was one of those guys that really split the fan base. Either you had a lot of faith in him or you had zero faith in him and wanted him out the door. So I'm assuming the people who wanted him out the door are happy. But I think we did reach. Look, normally when the Kwanzaa deal happened, I was like, when the rumor first started, I'm like, man, are we kind of giving up on this kid way too soon? And I know part of this could be on Kwanzaa, who wants playing time. And, when Slaughter's brutally honest with him, he might have been like, yeah, no, I'm not content being like 3 or 4. You got to figure Gomez is on the way back and is coming back with a lot more experience. And Gomez was the first one in initially over Kwanzaa, which would make Kwanzaa number 4. So maybe he did not want to stick around and leave. I think what makes the Kwanzaa deal okay for me overall is the fact that we have a buyback. If we didn't have the buyback, I think I would be a lot more worried about that. And not worried, but I would be like, man, did we give up too early? I think having the buyback makes it so that there's really nothing to lose, especially if you're able to get a player like Guehi in the door for like maybe like just spending like net 10, 15 million or something like that. And, upgrades, I would consider upgrade. We'll delve into the numbers now. Prince is back from a totally different location, from the study of the palace. Okay, so you move. Yes, so you're not a ghost anymore. So it was just the weird settings you had up front. How was the sound tests?
I think. What does it sound like from my end? Sound okay?
Yes, sound actually went back to normal one. There we go. I was hoping Kevin would be joining us this morning. Gay would be a goodbye. And I think, look, it's almost like they have to, right? I mean, I don't think Palace can afford to. We complain about Liverpool letting people leave on a free and stuff. I don't think Palace can afford to let Guehi just walk out the door next season. when they turned out 70 last year, you could argue as a Palace fan, hey, it's paid off. They won a trophy by keeping him. But now you do almost have to cash in. We'll go to those numbers in a little bit. I do have some like stats to kind of like in terms of comparison. But let me ask you first, Matush. We were talking about the Quansah ordeal. What is your take in the amount sold, the transfer overall? How do you view it?
I mean, I think it's fantastic business to be able to get a buyback clause for a player like Quansah, given that I know he is still young, he is still raw. You still want to give him a chance to see what he can do, but it's not like he's totally unproven to the point of we're not sure what he's capable of. Like, we have a good idea of what he can do well. It's just a matter of how well can he do those things, to what level can he do it. So to be able to get a buyback clause for a player like that, I think is amazing business, because you take the flyer on if he reaches that next level, that plateau where you want him to reach, easy, you bring him back. And if he doesn't, then you pretty much it was a wash for Frimpong, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at money wise, is nearly a wash. So you either look at it as a wash for Frimpong, or you look at it as 70 for Wirtz. And in both cases, I think you're ahead. So with a kind of a trade for Frimpong and the possibility of bringing him back, it's just it was a no-brainer deal for me. I think, unfortunately for Quansah, he's going to have to play under Erik ten Hag, which probably isn't the best. You go from Klopp to Slot to Ten Hag, and you're like, man, this is Timu at its best. But he needs to have a chance to play 50 games in a year, right? He can't just keep rotating if you really want to see what you're going to get out of him. So I think it's good for him. I think it's good for the club. I will think it's better for the club once we get another center back.
So, okay, here's the ordeal, though. I think we're on the same page there. We're both thinking it's a great deal, but the main part of that great deal is the buyback clause. Good morning, Mike. You should make this a habit. Grab a cup of coffee, preferably in a grumpy mug if it's on a Monday. But if it's not, coffee or tea or reckless, there you go. You can do Matush way. But here's the thing. If I take out the buyback, because I think that was like when I first heard of it, my initial reaction was the same way. I'm like, man, did we give up too early? I know he's made some mistakes. And unfortunately for the kid, the mistakes he's made have always been like really costly. Like there are times as a defender, you make a mistake, but somebody bails you. Unfortunately for him, like whenever he's made a mistake like that United game and like a bunch of games, it has resulted in a goal. So a lot of fans don't have a lot of trust in him and stuff. If I take away the buyback, though, how would you feel about selling him? Because I think that's kind of like what's made the deal okay for me. The buyback saying, okay, so we have absolutely nothing to lose. If he turns out to be a great center back, we just bring him back. If he doesn't, then yeah, we really banked on him then.
Yeah, I think you put yourself in a little bit of a scary situation with your current center back depth, with the talks of Konate allegedly not going too well, even though it seems like that article has been turned away by a few people, and Konate himself retweeting some sort of stuff about it being nonsense. But you're right. If there's a plan in place and you're able to then replace Quansah and then maybe still, because we talked about getting another center back even with Quansah at the club. So we're talking about two more center backs at this point, right? So if you don't have the plans, or if it doesn't go through as well as you'd like it to, then you really you set the club up for really thin at the back. And we've seen that story before. We've seen that movie here way too many times. Speaking of Nat Phillips, right, going to West Brom, we've seen that too much. And I think what you're saying is right, is that because of the buyback, it looks like good business. Without the buyback, it could be seen as almost like self-sabotage, if you will, because of the amount of depth you're losing, plus the age that he is. So I think, but I can't look at it that way because there's a buyback, right? So, it is what it is because there is the buyback. So it's great business. But in a window, yeah, it's maybe not the best sale.
Yeah, I mean, you're generating funds out of a player. And here's the thing. I really think Quansah's perspective is a huge part of this ordeal. Like maybe he did not want to be 4, maybe 3. Like he definitely did not want to sit behind. Center backs, I mean, some people will tell you Nello, but I would tell you no. I have not seen. I mean, he's the one that everybody constantly talks about from the youth team, but from what I've seen of him, I don't have as much confidence in that sense. And I think, look, we're gonna go into the Guehi deal, and I think like Kevin being in the audience will be a huge help in that, in terms of going behind the numbers, because obviously I pulled out the stats and we have watched them a lot with England and stuff like that as well. And I think Ten Hag, if you subtracted the Manchester United episode, and I know it's hard and difficult for us because we follow the Premier League, I'm actually kind of glad he's with Ten Hag, because Ten Hag is coming through the Dutch system, and known for developing players and Ajax and stuff like that. I think he's a good manager for him to have. I think Ten Hag, just like any other manager who kind of rolled the dice and said, I'll be the guy, I'll be the hero at United, kind of got this blemish on his record instantly. But I think that's more United than Ten Hag personally, like the drama of United. Who has come to United? There's some really good managers, big name managers who have come to United and left they're duds. And I think Ten Hag is going to be one of those guys. And I think he's going to do well at Leverkusen. But actually, I was kind of happy he's going to a guy like that who will kind of develop him. But let me pull this up, because here's the thing. I mean, going back to what you were saying, if you look at his numbers, mostly let's focus on the efficiency, because obviously the volume is going to be a bit more distorted based on playing time and stuff like that. Guehi has a lot more minutes under his belt. The biggest thing you're getting, I feel with Guehi over Quansah, because you can look at this, Mateusz, as I give you for 10 million, possibly 15 million, you're making this upgrade right here. And the biggest difference, I think, is in the aerial duels. One, even though Guehi is not a big dude, he's a lot better in the air. And he's complained, Slot has complained, and he yanked him, remember, in the very first game at halftime, because he was losing all his aerial duels and stuff. Not looking at the age and all that kind of stuff. If I told you 10 million to 15 million, you're upgrading from Quansah to Guehi, would you do this deal? Looking at these numbers, looking at the profile of the player and stuff.
Going in blind, not knowing players or ages, 10 to 15 million seems like a lot to pay for that difference, to be honest. Okay. I think, but in today's market, maybe 10 to 15 really isn't. It's 1 to 2 million actually, right? So at that point, it does maybe make sense. But it's so hard to look at it knowing that, the level that Guehi is able to play at, that we've seen him play at, that we've seen him play for Palace, that we've seen him play internationally as well. And so I think if again, blind looking at those 10 to 15 million, maybe not a huge upgrade, but then when you factor in everything else, I think it's well worth it.
See, I feel 10 to 15 is like you say, it's nothing right now. I mean, 10 to 15 million for an upgrade. We keep going back to this buyback thing, but for an upgrade, and then you have a buyback, just think of him giving him to Crystal Palace another 10, 15 million. And now you're getting this guy. Would you? Because I feel we would definitely, as fans, have more confidence. Let's say Konate is out, because let's face it, Konate's injury history last year's was, as a team, obviously we did a lot better, but it's more exception to the rule, because he's usually missed a lot of time. Aside from that jackass Endrick tackle, he's done well and he hasn't gotten injured, and that tackle was just obnoxious. But if I told you Konate is out or is being rested, would you be a lot more confident knowing Guehi is playing there instead of Quansah?
Yeah, but I think I don't think I was ever as low on Quansah as some fans were to a point, right? I think I was a little bit higher on him. So personally, there weren't times where, Quansah has to play, this is going to be a rough game. I never really had that feeling to it. It was more so, I hope he doesn't do anything else that will make the manager make another decision that will make more fans turn on him, kind of thing. So for me, I never saw it that way. But I just said, Guehi is a better player. He has shown that he's a more consistent Premier League defender. He has shown that he's a more consistent international defender. I know that doesn't mean anything for Liverpool, but I think there has to be consistency in your players, right? You don't want guys to show up for a few weeks, disappear, show up for another few weeks, disappear, whether it's internationally or whether it is at the club level. So I think all in all, I would feel more comfortable with Guehi being in there. Van Dijk and Guehi sound like a fantastic pairing. I just don't want to overpay for Guehi because I think there is a cap there. I don't know if I know there are numbers being thrown around. Like last year, the 70 would have been too much. But if we're talking 45, 50, then fine.
That's what's being talked about right now. 50 is what Crystal Palace wants. Yeah. I'm sure Kevin can put in a good word, and then we'll get him for like 40 or something like that. I'm thinking like 45 is probably what it's going to end up being, and there might be some other bonuses. And I think this is where the international experience actually means something to me for Guehi, because I feel like with goalies and defenders, being in a team where there will be more defending. Because Palace did like countering and stuff like that. So being a lot more defensive and playing in a system like that, and then coming to a team where you're gonna see less of the ball on apart from like build up and stuff. You're gonna be the more on the attacking side. Sometimes it's a huge change for goalies as well as for defenders. Some goalies are a lot better if they're constantly in action. And it takes a special kind of goalie, for example, to just suddenly show up and do like a 1v1 like Ali does and stuff like that. I think the international part of it gives me confidence that Guehi can do both. And he can play on a team that's attacking high line and stuff like that and like protect against the counter. So, I feel like it's a no-brainer. And it's like he's young. Especially for the position. I think Mike was saying it earlier. For his position, I still feel like he's young. And the buyback and everything like that is a huge step. With Gomez, this probably, if nothing else, for the homegrown numbers and stuff like that, probably means Gomez is staying, which I'm really thrilled about. Do you still think we need another center back? Because you said initially, like, we probably need one. And then if, Quansah is gone too. Do you still think we need another one? Or is that just because lack of confidence in Gomez staying healthy and Konate staying healthy?
I think you still need another one. If anything, as a potential Van Dijk successor / depth to the eventual Konate Gomez struggles with their injury record, at least. So I just keep going back to thinking about needing two in this past year when we had Van Dijk, Konate, Quansah, and Gomez. We still were talking about having two. So I do think you still need another one. I don't know if maybe Guehi could take over that left side and be the Van Dijk successor. I don't know how comfortable he is on that side. I feel like he plays on the left side more often for Palace, but that might be out of necessity because the right side of defense needed the right side of defense because they're not comfortable on the left. So if he can be that Van Dijk successor on the left side, then you don't need as big of a buffer, but I do think you still need one. It doesn't have to be, a 40, 50, $60 million center back. You can look for that 15, 20, 25 million and maybe strike gold in there, but it doesn't have to be, some high profile center back.
That's the thing. Guehi is comfortable probably playing across the back because he's played with like three in the back and stuff like that, which I know when his name was thrown around, everybody was like, are we going back three? I doubt it. I think he still is a guy who can play on the left and on the right. So like he would play and look, Van Dijk is only getting older. You probably do want to save some of his minutes and you need somebody competent to be able to do that. I felt like whenever we did that, we didn't really have anybody reliable on the left. Neither Quansah or Konate, when they slide to the left, look as comfortable. The catch is you are basically signing. Look, we've had this conversation before. Like, where are they going to play might not be an issue for us. But as a player, it's kind of hard to get really high talents who is going to be fourth or fifth in the depth chart. So it will have to be like your price range guy that's just happy to be at Liverpool, or somebody maybe who is loaned, who can be called back and stuff like that. Because I think, when you go back to last year, Gomez was out majority of the year. That's why it felt like we needed a center back. But I know what you're going to say. We're probably one of them is going to be probably out again, and we're going to be on the same boat. But how challenging is it going to be to get a guy to buy into the, what we're doing over here? I really like the program. I would love to be a fourth, fifth center back on this team, kind of a deal. That's going to be tricky. Yeah, I'll do it too. I'll do it for peanuts.
I mean, the thing with Gomez though is I didn't even see him too much as center back depth last year as much as I did wing back depth if we needed it. I think that was the big thing that we also needed a little bit is just in case with Bradley's struggles of staying healthy, and then with Trent having those few moments of being injured, like it would have been really nice to have had that wing back depth, and then even on the left side, right, to play instead of Costas some games. I think both of us would take Gomez on the left side ahead of Costas. So it'll be interesting with Milos coming in on the left side, and then having Frimpong and Bradley on the right side. You don't need as much of that wing back cover, so you then do keep him more as center back cover, and then maybe that does take up that spot that we're talking about of having that fourth or fifth choice. Because you're right, we've talked about this before. You can buy all the players you want in your video game, but if you are trying to sell a dream to someone to come and play behind two other people, you're not going to be able to sell that well unless they're like 17, 18 years old, or they're 34, 35 years old and it's their last go. But with center backs, we're not going to be looking for someone in Van Dijk's age. We're supposed to be looking for someone closer to Quansah's age, right? So,
yes, wasn't Ibiza, but yes, good to be back. Well, I mean, relatively. Yeah, I mean, I wish I was still on vacation, but on air. Probably could have worked it out if it was a bit longer. But yes, hung out with Slots, had some good times over there. Since you brought up the left back conversation, let's dive into that real quick, because it could be a Milos Monday later on today. I mean, it's only like 9:30 here. Last time, I think when it got official, like when the club announced it, it was really late in the afternoon, our time too. So it could still be a Milos Monday. A lot of talk about Robertson. You just literally said you would rather play Gomez at left back than Costas. So it's a no-brainer, I think, for everybody involved, including myself, to move Costas over Robertson. How do you see that being played out, though? Because when you look at Costas's quotes, we had a quote from him, I think, on our socials like a week or so ago, where he says he will rather play, I think he said 40, which was really being generous. He's probably going to play like 10, 15 games and make coffee for Mo rather than play 40 to 50 games and not being able to make coffee for Mo, like in another club. Like he would rather be a backup. He's comfortable with that role. Does that alone basically make him the guy who's going to stay by default?
Yeah, and you have to look at the price tag as well. He's going to earn a lot less than Robertson. He's also going to be able to go a bit longer than Robertson still with the age. Even though Costas is a little older than, like, I keep thinking of him as this 23, 24-year-old up-and-coming left back. Like he's getting up there now. It's not necessarily where he was before. And so when you factor in the wages, when you factor in the locker room, and there is something to be said about having a lot of changes in the locker room and moving likable players, right? You don't want to have that much upheaval. You don't want to move too many guys that are well-liked within the locker room. And I think Costas is one of those guys. You can see it on the field. Not playing wise, because I think they kind of get pissed at him when they play, but outside of playing, you can see it that they all really do like the dude, and he seems like a good spirit, and he seems like a good teammate all around. And so I think, not that Robertson isn't, but if you're gonna have to keep one of them and you factor in everything, Costas is probably the one that's gonna stay.
Really? See, I feel like, which I had to look up what Kalimera is what it is. You're Polish. This is Greek, actually, but would you like to take a crack at how it's pronounced? You're closer in Poland.
Oh, geographically? Your language is closer.
No, it's not. Well, it kind of is, I guess. But here's the thing, though. Yeah, see, I'm not agreeing to that. Just because you can make coffee and jokes and wave around your ponytail. I mean, the fact that he is content with being a squad player and not cause any issues is a big bonus, right? I get that, but I would rather have Robertson's leadership and experience if you're looking at just off the pitch stuff. On the pitch, I think it's no brainer, right? We're in agreement. It's Robertson over Costas. But even off the pitch, I think I would rather have Robertson's experience, leadership, and when he talks, people listen concept as opposed to Costas, the fun guy kind of a deal.
I can see that argument as well. I'm not going to say that I disagree. A little bit of both. Yeah, exactly. But I guess my question to you is, as a business, from a business standpoint of the club, who's going to be more financially sound to keep and more financially sound to sell?
You're probably going to get more for Robertson, I would think, right?
Yes.
God knows if anybody has ever watched me talk about Costas, they're not signing him. So his value has dropped radically. But I go with a replacement cost on this one. I feel like, if you're going – and I think that's the issue with Atletico Madrid. Like I think our evaluation is a lot higher than what Atletico is hoping to. I think Atletico said like, oh shit, they're getting a good left back, a young one. Let's go get that other one. And when they found out what the price is going to be, I don't know if that's going to happen at the end. But I feel like in the I'd rather have Robertson walk on a free and lose the 10 million or 15 million you're going to get for him, because I think he's that valuable off the pitch as well as on the pitch as a backup there, compared to keeping Costas, who probably does not have, even though he's younger, probably doesn't have as much of a sale value. You might be able to sell him to like Olympiacos or something like that, who would pay, because he's Greek, like 8-10 million or something like that. But I don't think I'll look up his value right now.
Yes.
But
their own version of their buyback clause. There wasn't even a buyback clause. They just bought him back. But I would like to say I would prefer to keep Robertson over Costas. I'm not trying to say that I would rather keep Costas over Robertson. I'm just saying that I think that's the way the club is going. And I understand the experience argument. I understand the leadership argument. But I think just cost-wise, it probably makes more sense for your backup to be more of a backup rather than Robertson, where he might not want that role, right? And if he's not that great, if he's not that happy with that role, suddenly that voice becomes a little becomes a little rough, right? Like he's maybe not as happy. Maybe his leadership isn't as good because he's not in a role that he wants to be in. So that there's that part of it too.
So he says Robo will want to play. Yeah, why are you in, by the way? You're late. But that's why I see him going to Atletico while Costas is happy playing 15 minutes a season. I think that's probably the biggest selling point. I'm going to go back to the Konate question that Ozan had. But Dom says good points, but maybe move both for Hato, keep Gomez to cover everywhere. Well, I think that's a great scenario. Let me ask you and everybody in the audience, because, I'm the voice of pessimism. Let me bring that out over here. Is there a concern for moving too many parts? Because you can't have what we did last season and talk about, we didn't bring anybody in and keeping the same team and stuff. Consistency was the key to success and stuff. And then move around 5, 6, 7 pieces and expect not to be some kind of a drop off, at least initially.
Yeah. Maybe you hope that gets worked out in preseason, and you see a rough preseason, but then you see them get their act together before the start of the season. But we're talking about 4 or 5 changes to the starting 11 that we were used to last year, right? So that is cause for a little bit of concern. I think the only thing to sort of think about as far as the positives of that is that Slot has proved that he can kind of manage with the pieces that he has. And yes, while the players that were there didn't change, the way that they played changed, and they still had to adjust to that. And I think if they're able to adjust to that last year in the time that they did, I think that the new players could bed in with the older players, maybe not as quickly, but maybe just as well, because Slot was able to get what he needed out of each person individually. Because it seems like he's trying to take the best out of each person individually to fit what he wants them to do. Whereas Klopp was very much, the whole team does a similar thing, right? And they all cover similar spaces. They all do similar things because the system was very much predicated on the press being united throughout everyone. Whereas Slot, while it is very team-based, I think he individually needs players to do things individually themselves more often. So if you can get that out of those players individually, then they could bet in just as well. That's at least how I feel.
Yeah, see, that's good to have somebody a bit more optimistic than I. Not that I'm pessimistic. We'll go to that. But hey, Mick is joining us. Welcome aboard, Mick. Thank you, sir, for subbing and liking. I keep forgetting to say it, but if you're watching us live, do hit that thumbs up. It's basically helps us get in front of people like Mick. Now he's doomed because he's following us and he's gonna see us every freaking morning. Which, by the way, speaking of, we are doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but soon we will be doing the Tuesday, Thursday back in action as well. So coffee every freaking morning. Dom says the spine is kept. See, here's the thing. The last time we made this many changes, because Ozan is saying, am I concerned that we're going to have a slow start to the Premier League due to all the new faces? A little bit. Not, I mean, because you're bringing so much quality, it's not you just bringing new people. And I think the thing that doesn't make me as pessimistic is the fact that you're bringing a lot of experienced people. Like, even though they're young, they have experience at the top level. So you're not bringing like young guys who are going to be like in a little bit of a shock, right? Like coming to Kerkez obviously has Premier League experience as well, but Frimpong and Wirtz coming together are going to be, they have that kind of a synergy. They've been at the top level. They won the Bundesliga. They have the experience. But the last time we made so many changes, it was just the midfield. Like, we just scrapped the entire midfield. And even then, we were concerned and we had like really low expectations going into the season at the time because we were like, we don't know how this midfield is going to work. But we had the back four was the same behind them. And for the most part, the front line was. I feel like now you're changing your backs. You might possibly be changing one of your center backs, but definitely the right back and left back are different. You're going to have a different setup in midfield because you're going to have Wirtz in there somewhere. And we're talking about like possibly a new striker and stuff like that. I guess that's why I am a little concerned that initially there might be some hiccups in terms of synergy and getting on the same page. Preseason will be important, but preseason is never the same as, taking the field against like Newcastle or something like that at Anfield.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know. I saw Liverpool play United last year in South Carolina, and I knew we were going to win the league after seeing that preseason game. So I don't know what you're talking about, man.
Let's go back to this question. Ozan was saying to you, the Polish prince, if you're concerned a lot about Konate's ordeal, does that change what we might do? Because here's the thing. I don't think people who would want Konate are going to be coming in with a good offer this summer, knowing and just having watched Trent and everything like that somebody can leave on a free. So you're kind of stuck with it either way, right?
Yeah, you'd be hard-pressed to find a Liverpool fan that isn't worried about the Konate contract situation, right? I think everyone should have a little bit of worry, whether it's 10%, 20%, some sort of percentage in your head where you're thinking, okay, well, we can't possibly lose this good of a defender for free, right? I mean, you're thinking about his age, you're thinking about his profile, his build, just the size that he is, right? The pace that he has for that size. And yeah, I mean, mentally he can switch off sometimes, but overall he is on his day a fantastic defender. And if you are going to lose out on any money for him, that is a big worry. And I think July and August, maybe more so August, if there isn't a contract extension by then, I think we're really going to be looking to sell him because even if it's for 25, 30, below his value, you need to get something for him, because otherwise it's just another asset that you're letting walk away for free, that you could have definitely made some money on, even especially in a window. You're already dropping 170 million now between Wirtz, Kerkez, and Frimpong, right? Like, we're already up there. We're nearly at 200 million. And there's talks of Guehi for 50 or at 220. Some sad souls out there think Isak is coming for 100, so you're at 320.
Some sad souls. How dare you? How dare you?
It's not happening. It's not happening.
I was going to ask you that, but you already answered this. So you don't think it's happening. Why would you shoot my hopes like that? Because I feel like there's a glimmer of hope in there in terms of it happening, based on if Isak says, I want to go.
If this was a window, let's say last year, where we didn't do anything and we had that one signing, I think it makes sense. I think the money is there. The money is there. It's there for Wirtz.
Yeah.
I just don't think that there is also another random 100+ million sitting around in John Henry's back pocket for Isak as well. I don't think, and honestly, as much as I like Isak, I think he's one of the best strikers in the Premier League. His injury record is too concerning to spend that amount of money on, I think.
That's fair. Yeah, 1% chance, 99% fee. That's kind of like where I'm at. I don't think it's. And goes back to the injury thing. I don't know, because normally if you sell Nunez for, I think we're kind of stuck on 50 to 60, and you're paying another 40, 50 or something like that to upgrade to Isak. Again, for an upgrade cost, I think that's pretty good. By the way, I don't know how accurate these numbers are, because Costas was at 18 million, by the way, for value. Konate is at 60. But I'll be honest, man, I feel like in the sport as a whole, we're going into an era where more and more players are going to do this. And maybe you can call it taking a chance on themselves, because if there's an injury, obviously it's going to hurt them. But I think more and more players are going to be doing this. So you are going to be losing some players for nothing. When you're spending so much money, I agree with Mick. I am excited about what we can see on the pitch, because we've added so much speed that I felt like we were lacking at the right back, left back, Wirtz as well, in terms of agility and stuff like that, and taking people on. I almost think let's say you sell at a loss, like you said, right? Getting 25, 30. I think it goes back to the replacement cost again. I don't think it's worth it to kind of throw yourself in a situation where you're losing ultimately your starting center back as you go into a season where suddenly you are probably the favorite, not only because you won by a mile, but then the additions you made on top of it. It feels too cheap of a move to say, well, he's leaving, so let's get 25 for him or something, and risk your season because you lost your starting center back.
That's fair. Yeah, absolutely.
Are we in the E? Are we? I'll ask you that. Do people look at what Trent did? What Mbappe did. Forget Trent before that, like with Mbappe and stuff like that, and say, yeah, that's the way to go. Would you do it as a player?
Why do you always ask me what would I do? What I would do never makes any sense. I would do a little bit of.
I know that. That's why I'm establishing a low bar for other players to follow. So,
man, here's the thing. And I was having this conversation with my wife, not about this because she never talked about it.
She tried to extend your contract, because I know it was your guys' anniversary, right?
I was gonna walk, but
happy anniversary. The contract is up, dealing an extension. I hear you. I don't know if Michelle is gonna sign you again, but
I was talking about how, as people, so often we love to say what we would do in a situation. We see something on the news. We see something, happening in the neighborhood, whatever the case might be. And you go, oh, if that were me, I wouldn't have done that. I would have done something completely different. And then you get into that situation and you freeze, or you do something completely different because you don't know what you're going to do until you're actually in that situation. And that's, I think, one of my biggest pet peeves is hearing people talking about what they would do if they were there. in whatever context it is. And it's all crap because you don't know what you would do until you're actually put in that position. So long-winded way of answering your question. I don't know what I would do.
You are no fun.
Okay, so I think here's the difference. If I am homegrown through the academy is my boyhood club, I think I would want to give them back something. So I would sign a contract in hopes that they could then sell me and get some sort of money back for me. If this was sort of a random team that I signed to that I'm not necessarily supporting of my entire life and my age is where I'm at, then maybe I run it down. But I think that is important to contextualize the situation based on, am I a fan of this club? Did I grow up with this club? Or was this just another stepping stone in my career?
See, I feel like, I get that. Which, let's face it, for a huge majority of players, that's really not going to be the case, especially later on in the years. Maybe in your early 20s or something like that, I can see that happening. But, once you move on to another team, I guess the question more is, since you're no fun and you're doing it yourselves, if you had future little princes in the future, would you tell them to roll the dice on themselves? Because, here's the thing, as a player, especially if you're Konate, right? We've been talking about his injury records, right? Something happens to him, God forbid, and he gets injured towards the end of the season. He kind of loses that value in the bigger markets. He might still keep his value close, and the contract he gets offered from Liverpool might be about the same. But if he hits the free market, now his market value, everybody's going to be like, let's take a look at your medical record. And, the price is going to go down. So ultimately, as a player, you kind of roll in the dice on staying healthy and having a good season. Would you recommend that to a player, especially like Konate, who has an injury history?
I would recommend Konate sign the contract yesterday. That's what I would recommend. I think especially if you have an injury record, the safest way to ensure that you're going to make money is to extend your contract, right? And we don't have to sit here and say, hey, Ibu, we're going to give you, this contract is for 5 years. You have to sign for 5 years. Even if it's just 2 years, just an extension, 3 years, maybe max if you need it. But I understand the betting on yourself, but there is safety in signed contracts. And for someone like Ibu, that would be the safest route because you have that guaranteed amount there if anything were to happen.
And, you can always negotiate and say, hey, if so-and-so comes to me, that's my childhood dream, blah, blah, blah. I have a release clause of like 50. You guys get your money. I get my, long-term wish or something like that. He might have always wanted to play for PSG or something like that, whatever, as French kid. But Nat Flips is gone. Nat Flips, he puts his head everywhere. Nat Flips is a perfect example of a guy I feel like we did not cash in when we should have. And I think
he was supposed to play next to Van Dijk because he was supposed to be the starting center back.
Yes. What was that all about? Yes, there was some major delusion going on about that. But I have no idea. Honestly, whoever club he's interested with, I'm sure there'll be some photo dug up in terms of like what he was wearing when he was a kid or something like that. I threw up PSG out there. That's my bias because he's French. He might not be PSG. He might have always wanted to play for Real or something.
He was born in Paris, so it's not too far-fetched to think that maybe he is a fan of PSG, or maybe he's a fan of Paris FC. Maybe he was like, oh, I don't like the big brother. I want the underdog.
If they come for him, yeah, I don't know. Hey, what's going on, man? Rasta is in the house. Yes, I always forget to say it. So thank God somebody in the audience occasionally reminds me to ask for it as well. But yes, if you have not done so, please hit that like so some poor soul out there gets exposed to our content as well. And if you have not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you can have a cup of coffee with us every morning over here. So since you poo-pooed my Isak dreams over here, yeah, you did. What do you expect to happen up top?
Josh Zirkzee. Just kidding.
How much of the transfer fee does the player get? There's a sign-on ordeal. I don't know how that works in extensions, I think there is like a sign-on bonus, if you will. But I think more often than not, yeah, that's the part that goes up is wages. I think players mostly negotiate wages more than the sign-on fee. The catch is though, when you kind of like work out your contracts, you get best of both worlds. You get the higher wages and possibly even higher wages than you normally would get, because now that club did not have to fork out 30-40 million for you. They can take half of that 20 million and spread it to your like weekly wages and stuff like that, plus give you like a 5 to 10 million sign-on fee. So they ultimately actually spent less, you got a lot more. So I do understand why people would do that. And I agree with Rasta, especially with like, you know, Lucho, we talked about that as well. But what is it going to be up to? Because let's face it, these players can get a lot more than probably what we would be willing to go up to them, especially in Lucho's case, Mateusz, because of his age.
Yeah, we're because Lucho's is something absolutely ridiculously low, right? I think it's under 80.
Yeah, I
believe.
want to say it's like 50 or something like that. Let me dig that up. Let me ask Uncle Google here. But it was like, yeah, it was yes, 55.
Yeah, I mean,
50, yeah, 24,000, a merely measly $74,000. And you know what the thing is, by the way, let me get this out of the way because it really bugs the hell out of me. So we had a reel going out about this topic. I think it's Galley or somebody talking about the fact that he's very underpaid. And there were like 100 comments saying like football players are like, they're playing a kid's game. Dude, like, get past this. As an adult, you have to get past your jealousy and everything like that. If you could play like Lucho, then you should play, and then you would get 75,000 a week, and you would shut the hell up. But this is the market. This is what these guys get. So somebody was like, "That's 55,000 more than he should," and stuff. Like, shut the hell up. I mean, you compare yourself in your business to what other people are getting, right? You don't say like, for what I do, I'm amazed I make this much. So like, I could not believe some of the comments over there saying like, soccer players are overpaid and stuff like that. Yeah, I guess, but this is the market, so they're getting paid. So either learn soccer or shut the hell up.
Just wait till you tell them what NBA players make. I mean, if they're annoyed by 55 a week, just imagine the biggest contract in the NBA right now is like 54 million a year. So yeah, that's over $1 million a year or $1 million a week. So yeah, just wait until some of those guys find that out. Then they'll be really mad.
No shit. I mean, here's the thing: like Lucho, hundreds, but Lucho can go anywhere else and get a lot more than 100. So that's not like that might make us feel better, like he's getting more, but he's not going to be like, oh, great, thanks, you're giving me 100 now.
Yeah, and part of it maybe we look at it as a reward thing, but at the same time, that is the contract he signed, right? I think you can look at it that way too, is that when he came over, that was what was offered and that's what they agreed upon. I mean, it's not necessarily the fault of the club that said, hey, this is where we're thinking. And the agent was like, all right, that's great. Lucho was like, okay, that's great. And then that's what he's making. Yes, his output is well above what he's making. And we can talk about that all day. But he has every right to try and renegotiate as well. You know, I think there are moments where you can do that because you look at someone like Chiesa who makes like 175 a week or something like that. That's what was negotiated. And yeah, he played 15 minutes, so he made, 100,000 a minute. But it's one of those things where sometimes you should fight for yourself. And if you are deserving of a raise, so to speak, then you go and negotiate that. Sometimes if you're comfortable, you kind of just stay in the same place and the club's like, all right, if you're not going to say much, we really appreciate what you're doing. We don't have to change anything. Then we won't change anything.
That's fair. And honestly, like when he came over, that was a big raise for him, like from what he was getting at Porto. That was a huge raise for him. So when he came over, he got a raise. And there were a lot of people saying that as well. Well, that's on his agent and that's on him and stuff. I just think, while I agree to that and agree to what you're saying, that's what you negotiated, so that's what you kind of deal with. I think in the long run, doesn't that set a bad precedent when you approach other players? Because if you're saying, it's one thing to tell a guy, okay, we're going to bring you at 50, and then we'll see how things go. When people do well, we do reward them with like bigger contracts, as opposed to, like when you're recruiting, is that not a big help? As opposed to saying, man, you should have never signed the dotted line. We'll talk to you when the contract is up. Because as you recruit people in and you're negotiating maybe lesser wages than another team, with the promise of a more successful club and like a more established club and Champions League, whatever you're throwing out there on the table as selling points. One of those selling points I feel like should be, you can grow with this company kind of a line in soccer terms.
I think it's just a slippery slope though, because then if you just reward good play for bigger contracts, you're going to end up like United. You're going to end up like Chelsea, where you just have way too big of contracts all over the place because you kept just upping the amounts based on your reward system, however you set that up. So I think there's probably a nice balance of both in there that you need to take care of. And I'm just sitting in a chair in Northern Illinois. I don't know anything about anything. So the people that are over there are taking
Glad to have you on this morning. Yeah.
the best way that they know how. And I'm just here to talk sometimes and have some people listen, and some people like it and some people don't. And that's the beauty of a Monday morning. That is my
and more often, and you do it for free. Yeah, that's another thing. So Luca's a humble guy, which I do understand that. And I think as players, especially like a lot of the South American players, not to like stereotype, but they are coming from, they're not going through these academies and stuff like that. People, like a lot of players coming from Africa as well. They're not growing up in this, like high-end academies and catered like schools and stuff like that. They're kind of like going through a lot of hardships to get to the level. I just think, going back to your saying, if you are Lucho and you might, you're working your butt off and you're doing your thing, and you're going to do it anyway because you're a professional and you're playing to win, more like your competitive edge. But yeah, afterwards, like you're sitting in the dressing room and you look across and you're like, how is this dude making like 2 times? You look at Chiesa and you're like, yeah, he's a really funny Italian guy, but how is he making a lot more than I am? I'm playing. He hasn't even like sweating over here. He's eating a sandwich on the sideline. So I can understand over time that's getting to a player, but I don't think Liverpool is ever going to, even if you increase it, it would be more of a, I guess, like a courtesy, like, like acknowledgement of what he's doing and stuff like that, but it's never going to be competitive. And I don't know if that's worse. I mean, I guess I'll ask you, is that worse? Like if I come to you and say, if I go to Lucho and say, you know what, we're going to double it, like Rasta was saying, like we're going to double it because we respect what you do, you give all you have and stuff like that. Is that more of an insult when Lucho can get like 200, like they're like that, that dude is giving 250 over there. Like, you think this is like nice, giving me 100?
I don't think he would. No, I don't think so. I think if no matter where you are, if you're being offered double of what you're being paid currently, I don't think you'll still look around and go, oh, but that guy, because that's such a big jump. Man, I don't know. I wouldn't think so. I think, but that's because maybe the player that he is, because we've always talked about how well we do in bringing on the personalities that we do, the temperament of these players that we have, the character of these players that we have. We just do a good job of bringing those kinds of guys in. So I don't think he would look across the room and go, oh, but that guy's making 200. Because I think there would have been some noise by now if he felt that way. If he truly felt like, oh, those guys over there are making 150, that guy over there is making 200, that guy over there is at 175, then there would have been more noise. But he's just playing.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Speaking of money, yeah, I actually do let me know if the ads are kind of like over the top. They're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be when you first come to our videos, because honestly, it's not even worth annoying people over. Let me put it that way. In terms of like the funds that generates kind of a deal. So if it is really getting annoying or intrusive, honestly, do let us know. I do mean this very honestly, and then we'll kind of turn it out. Should I put in a bet for yeah, you just joined us, man. If you ask Mitush, you don't know. The odds are great. I wonder what are the odds, by the way, football flashback? You should tell us.
Can we also get over this whole FSG finally finding their wallet thing? We've known they've had the wallet. They were going to dish out the money for Caicedo. They were going to dish out the money year after. We just know that they only dish out the money on players that they truly feel are worth the amount of money that they're willing to put in. This FSG saved this club from near bankruptcy. Like, we have to get over this and actually give them their flowers, especially given everything that they've done for the club in the last decade.
Yeah, I think so. Look, that's always been the criticized. They get the criticism for that all the time, right? They only spend what they bring in and stuff like that. But they didn't do anything last summer. In some ways, we're doing 2 summers worth of business. And honestly, you can add January to that as well. So there's like 2 windows. So 3 windows rolled into one if you include this summer as well. So I think it's fine. And look, there's going to be a lot of outgoings. There's already talk about Elliott going to Brighton. And we know one thing that Edwards does well is move people for a lot of money. Yes, I think that's part of like why they get that talk a lot. But I don't know. I feel like more and more. I mean, I'll ask you this, and honestly, like anybody who's on the other side of the pond watching us, I feel like they are slowly converting people. I mean, summer like this obviously goes a long way, but I think as you see other teams, not being able to buy until they sell and stuff like that, you would think they should get some appreciation for the sustainability factor.
And 2 Premier Leagues and a Champions League with 3 visits to the final. Like, what? Yeah. What more could you?
Success. Yes.
You just happen to go up against another giant in City for 7 years, where you could have won 5 to 6 titles in that span, right? You set yourself up to compete. Now the results didn't end up going the way that you would hope them to go forward, but everything that they've done have set this club up for success, for sustainability, and it's allowed us to compete without sacrificing things, right? I understand that sometimes the depth wasn't there, but you have to also realize you can't just buy players for the sake of buying players and hope that they're okay being the 7th choice behind all these other guys. We talked about it earlier today. There is a line there that you can't toe, and I just think it's hilarious to see people still complaining, even after all the success, after all the money after not even the money being spent on players, but you have to think about the money that's been invested into the academy, the money that's been invested to the facilities, the money that has been invested into the women's team. Like, all of this is combined into this entire club. And you can't just look at transfer fees and going, FSG out, they don't spend money. That's crap.
It is crap. I mean, yeah, like, Dom is listing all that stuff. They have been, all the people who complain, and I do agree that most of the complaints are because they're American. I don't know if they look across the Premier League and say, we will rather have this ownership. Like, find me an ownership that you would prefer to have over FSG, because you can't have everything in the world. But you look at all the other owners, like, wish we had this ownership. I would really like to know, because I just don't see it. I think we're seeing that has gone down the window. Maybe that's why FSG gets more credit now, because it was always, if it wasn't for Klopp and kind of a deal. No, the team was there, and we saw last year, right? I mean, the team was there. The players are there. The players he listed earlier, Dom, I mean, they were there. They have been signed. Money has been spent. And it's, I would even give Richards Hughes a massage at this point. What is going on?
But guess who signed Klopp?
Well, yeah, that's another point. That's another good point. Yes.
They picked him because they knew that he was the man that they needed for this next generation of this club. Like, I know I'm not taking credit away from Jurgen, but he was also brought in by FSG because they believed in him.
Yeah, and I think it was the perfect guy for the system they have. Jude is out for 4 months. I'm sure Trent will be sitting next to him, like feeding him soup or something like that in the hospital, so he'll be fine. No, not worried about that. Honestly, now I'm watching Real Madrid games. It's a hate-love relationship because I'm watching to see how Arda is doing, but then I'm also watching Trent and seeing. By the way, yes, all that Trent stuff happened while I was on vacation, but so I didn't get to spew my hate. So everybody's lucky for that because I could have gone on and on and on about how fluent he got in Spanish so fast. But okay, let's go back to the forward thing on our way out over here. What you said, Isak, you told Football Flashback not to place a bet. Are you expecting us to fork out? Because all the other players that are rumored, I'm not buying this Osimhen thing, Osimhen, because I don't think he's the right guy. Age-wise, number one, profile-wise, and personality-wise, I don't think he's the right guy for Liverpool. He's the right guy for this locker room. And everybody who kind of like uses what Napoli did to him, which I get, like in terms of like some of the racial abuse and stuff, and the insensitivity he got there. But he's done more of it in Galatasaray. He's done more of that. So that's him. That has nothing to do with like Napoli or anything like that. That's his personality with his age and stuff. I'm not buying that at all. But it's a possibility because they're interested in Nunez. Do you see something like that happening? Nunez plus, 20, 30, whatever it might be. Or do you see us spending money on some of these other younger guys that are rumored, like Ekitike and stuff like that? Since you poo-pooed Isak, where are you at?
I don't believe the Osimhen rumors. I don't think he'd be a good fit at the club. But Nunez plus money will be the route that they go for a striker. And I don't think if it is an Isak, it will feel a lot better knowing that there was 50, 60 for Nunez plus whatever the additional was for the replacement. I just think that there's a certain number that you hit that's really hard to justify when it comes to players who can't stay fit throughout the entirety of a season. That's the tough thing. But I do think that there will be some sort of striker signing. I genuinely have no idea which way the club will go with that. I really don't.
Yeah, I just don't know. Like the whole Osimhen thing. How do you spell this guy's name? Because I've heard like 85 different ones, but I think everybody knows who we're talking about. I think the deal is, I don't know if you get more in-store credits, if you will, by sending Nunez to Napoli towards him, as opposed to like selling him to Napoli for 60. Do you get in-store credits 70 towards like your purchase of Osimhen, to bring him over? But I just don't know if it does, get you more money that way. You can take the 60 or whatever you're going to get for him and then go spend it somewhere else. Because I follow his transfer because obviously Galatasaray is trying to keep him and stuff like that. Does not seem really very doable because of his wages and the wages he can get in like a Saudi league and stuff like that. So I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't know if we spend that much money. Like, look, we spent a ton of money on Wirtz, but it's as a sure bet as it can be based on what he's done, based on his profile, based on his experience and stuff. I don't know. You can say the same about Ekitike and like, some of these other guys that are like rumored. Do you think we roll the dice on the money on those guys? Especially after the Nunez experience.
Yeah, and I was just about to say, after the Nunez experiment, I think you take a more calculated approach at players who are more experienced that fit the profile of something that you could win now and not a project. You can't take someone raw again. Unless it's someone that Slot absolutely wants to develop himself, you have to get someone in who is a credible, ready to go striker that you need. And who knows? For all that we know, we could set up with Wirtz as a 10, kind of like right behind both Diaz and Salah playing as two strikers, right? Rather than having them out wide. So we might not even need a striker. Who knows? We do need a striker, but
that's true as well. Yes, Wirtz. We're practicing. I guess I got to practice on my Nigerian as well, so I can get his name down. But I'll be back tonight. Having learned another language with using Trent's tutor. I'll be with the gang at 7:00 Central, 8:00 Eastern. Do join us then. I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of all this stuff, and hopefully we'll get to celebrate Milos Monday if that gets announced by that as well. Have an excellent week, everybody. Thanks to all those joining us. Hit the like, subscribe, and as I always say, grab a friend by the ear, drag their butt over here, and have them subscribe as well. Polish Princess Barry's about to die. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you guys tonight. Take care.